Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Unchurned. I'm Josh Schachter, founder and CEO of UpdateAI. And joining me today, I'm very excited to introduce Jeremy Evans. Jeremy is the Senior Vice President of Customer Success and Renewals at Zuora. Jeremy spent over a decade leading CS teams globally. He's had several senior leadership executive roles at public and pre-IPO companies, New Relic, Marin Software, others. And he lives out in Colorado with his family. Jeremy, thank you so much for being on this episode.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks a lot, Josh.
So I think, most folks out there, I think in the SaaS world, our listeners are familiar with Zuora. You guys are powering more than 1,000 companies around the world. You've got major enterprise clients and then also a long tail of customers as well, over 1,200 employees. Tell us, though, I kind of hate describing companies myself and then botching the description. So tell us a little bit about Zuora and what you do at Zuora.
Yeah, the simple answer is, as a society, we are buying less stuff. We are subscribing to things. So when you think about all the different machinations and things that need to happen when you subscribe, it's not just that you agree to a subscription, but we also need to provision things. We need to make sure that you have your subscription, you want to cancel, you want to modify it. And Zuora really does all of that infrastructure for companies. So everybody from Zoom to Caterpillar, we touch thousands of different companies and different businesses, all in different parts of their subscription journey. And we really focus in on making sure that that experience for the customer is the best that that company wants, and making sure that our software can provide that to them.
So you guys are a SaaS company helping to build the infrastructure and foundation of SaaS.
Exactly. Yep.
Before we kind of get into some of the meat of your relationships with customers and building the team at Zuora, I want to get unchurned, if you'll allow me, in this segment here. Just get to know you a little bit. So I believe you live in Denver. Is that correct?
That's right. I'm south of Denver, a town called Highlands Ranch.
And where were you from? Where are you from originally?
Originally, I grew up in Canada, so I came down to the Bay Area in about 2010, I just got lucky. I picked a startup that did incredibly well. I got to have the whole journey of, the pre-IPO portion, raising funds, IPO, and then stayed for post-IPO. So I've been in customer success for about a dozen years now.
Awesome. What's something that would surprise people to know about you? Perhaps the folks that work underneath you at Zuora.
Work related, or are you talking non-work related stuff?
Oh, whatever's the best golden nugget, man. Whatever's going to be the most abstract or edge case here.
Something we were just talking about before the podcast. I'd say my bachelor party made the national news in Canada. Unfortunately, I woke up to my wife saying, "Why are you on the front page of the national news?" For nothing nefarious, just happened to be in a picture with a famous person in Canada. So. It was an interesting thing that happened to me. And yeah, I love scuba diving. That's another big thing. It's probably one of my most passionate things that I'm interested in. And I love to do it all over the world.
It would be a much better story, by the way, if it was for something nefarious that your bachelor party made the national news in Canada.
Exactly, yeah.
But that's okay. At least it made the headlines. So then, on that topic though of scuba potentially, you live out in Denver with your family, your wife and 2 kids. What's one of your favorite pastimes to do with your kids out there?
With my kids, I'm actually teaching my son to ski. So that's been a big focus for the last couple of weeks is we have an indoor ski hill here that he can actually learn to ski. And next couple of weeks, we'll get him up to Breckenridge or Copper or one of the bigger ski hills. And I'm really good. He's 4, by the way. So he's just learning to ski. That's going to be really fun for the next 10, 20 years and the rest of our lives.
French fries and pizza wedge. You gotta
That's exactly it.
Sharpen
That's all we
edges.
talk about. That's all we talk about.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's get into customer success, renewals, etc. Maybe you can paint a picture for us first before we get into some specifics about the company or about your organization. How is your group constituted? What's the makeup of it?
Yeah, so my group focuses in on, we run a value-driven or outcome-driven customer success team. So their main focus is making sure that customers are getting value out of our software. I have a couple other components of my teams where we focus in on things like our advisory groups. So Zuora advisory groups, customer advisory groups, communications, and then we also talk about renewals as well. So we have a combination of renewal specialists, as well as the overall sales team that conducts renewals as well.
So sales owns renewals at Zuora.
Yeah, and that team tends to fluctuate through my career. Sometimes it goes to one team, it kind of goes back and forth, kind of ebbs and flows with the direction or the model. So ultimately, we have our sales team owning renewals. We're looking at a couple different options too for the next year or 3 years. How we structure the teams and who ultimately owns renewals. And I've seen it fluctuate at a bunch of different companies. It usually tends to change with the modeling and how our sales teams are going to approach customers.
So that actually gets me to my next question, which is that you have a story I would like you to tell, which is the history of customer success at Zuora. You had CS, it was taken away, it was brought back, it's yo-yoed. Can you share with us, what the deal is, what happened with customer success at Zuora?
Yeah, sure thing. So we are on version 3, I like to say, of customer success, and a lot of companies kind of bounce back and forth between what version, what modeling, who's going to do what. I always tell people, this is the one job in the world. It's like Baskin Robbins. You can call 31 companies and get 31 different answers as to what customer success means. Totally. And for Zuora at the time, this is pre my involvement in Zuora, but we had a sales leadership group that decided one day, just came to the CSMs and said, "Hey, you all just became account managers. Why don't you go sell some product?" And unfortunately, that led to a lot of really bad behavior. Things that were getting sold that maybe customers didn't need, they didn't deploy. And also, we just removed the communication with our customers. So unless somebody wanted to buy something at Zuora, it was really challenging to talk to somebody and get somebody on the phone. So they weren't looking at long-term value for retaining customers, long-term growth, net retention. It was really about the point-in-time sales. And that did a lot of damage to the customer base. We had some really big challenges. It showed up in our stock price, our NPS, our gross net retentions, every single customer metric that we had or that you could measure customers on, satisfaction as well, started to go down. And it really started to show up in our numbers that we took our eye off the ball on customer success.
Do you recall what any of those numbers, I know you weren't there at the time, but do you know what any of those numbers were at that low point for customer retention?
Yeah, our NPS scores, they went very negative. So I would say they were sub one, negative 40, which is not great for a SaaS company. That's very bad damage. And the other ones, I could share a little bit about. They were below 100% for gross retention. So that means that below 90% for gross retention. So we were actually losing every dollar we put into the customers. A year later, we were actually 10% less. And net retention also was around 100%. So it became a bit of a challenge from a company perspective, especially reporting back up to Wall Street that showing growth in our business became a challenge.
I mean, that's a precarious situation that you guys were in. How long did you guys go without the CS team in that case?
I think it was about a year and a half. And, my involvement started, we had a new CRO come in from Adobe. Fantastic gentleman. He told me, I think he was on day 4 in his first week, and he kind of looked around and said, where are all the post-sales teams, people to talk to customers? And somebody told him they don't have those. And he told me he had a minor heart attack and immediately started trying to find somebody to start up the customer success motion again. And that's where I got involved. Okay,
great. So you came on board to lead their customer success motion. An amazing opportunity to bring the function back. Walk us through your steps, walk us through the genesis of what happened from your first days at Zuora.
Yeah, so I started day 2 of the pandemic lock-in. So, my onboarding and my experience was very different. I was very fortunate because it was an interesting time to join a company, that's for sure. We started off by looking at, what type of CS model do we want to have? Do we want these to be account management focused, owning commercial aspects? Do we want to continue down a value-driven outcome format and framework? And then how do we want the customers to perceive that? So I spent a lot of time talking to customers in my first, I would say, 60 to 90 days, understanding how they perceive Zuora, what were some of the gaps in our coverage and what they wanted to see long-term in the relationship. And then we started to look at what are some of the focus areas for customer success. So we started to focus in on a value-driven system where we could look at having a overarching customer framework as well that touched every aspect of that customer journey. So whether they were a brand new lead into the system, they were about to sign a contract, they were doing implementation, the post-sales environment, where we're delivering value, and then ultimately up to renewals. We wanted to make sure that we had a framework which we call journey to usership, which takes some of our expertise in subscriptions and we apply that to how each of these businesses run. So we've spent a lot of time looking at the format and the way that we were going to approach customer success. Then we also started looking at things like our tooling, for example. So we did a huge evaluation across multiple platforms, ultimately ended up picking Gainsight. I've used that in a number of different companies I've been a part of. I removed those systems. I built them in place as well. But ultimately, it provided the best bang for the buck for us and allowed us a central place to track those customer engagements, especially health scoring. That was a big part. So could we identify which customers were at risk? And then how do we take action against those across Zuora? So I was also fortunate that I also had a lot of executive sponsorship into customers. So the way that we think about customers and also the engagement, everyone from our chief product officer, chief revenue officer, we had executive sponsorship programs that we ran across our executive committees. And that really helped to instill inside the company that we are a people-first company, because we want to make sure that we have our people and the right people in the jobs to be able to be a customer-first company. And we've seen a lot of really positive results over the last 2.5 years, 3 years, which has really driven a lot more value into the customer base and helped us grow as a company.
Was that a movement, that people first, such that it's customer first movement or value scale? Was that a movement you had to create, or was this just something that became so apparent from that 1.5 2 year gap from CS that executives knew that they needed to change the culture, and it really then became just customer first, customer first, customer first?
Yeah, I think it was part of the lessons learned that they had from that negative outcome over the last couple of years before we started our customer success team again, was to make sure that and our CEO is very frank about this. Never again forget customer success. So when I went for interviews with him and I talked to him about like how he thinks about customer success, I generally think about there's two types of companies in the world. There's the ones that say they need customer success, and there's the ones that say they should have customer success. The shoulds are really about maybe somebody told them they need customer success at this stage of their company. It would be a nice to have. It's not really ingrained and instilled into the brand of the company. And then you have the needs. And when I meet a person that says they need customer success, I don't have to spend half my day justifying my team's existence or what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. The needs, as far as companies, they understand the value that customer success provides in a SaaS environment. And that has been really instilled from our CEO on down, that we don't want to go back to those old days, and we want to make sure that our customers have access to somebody that's going to be working to make sure that they're getting the most out of their investment in Zuora.
I mean, that's the type of company you want to work for if you're working in CS, right? It is Absolutely, the company that needs it. Yeah. Yep. Not the one that's just kind of hearing it in the CEO forums. Oh yeah, we should really look into this and keep up with the Joneses.
Exactly.
Yeah. What were some of the outputs and outcomes of that work when you first joined? Over the first couple of years, you said you guys were all the way down to like a negative 40 on your NPS. Can you share any of the stats and impact that CS was able to bring back?
Yeah, it was a big big success story, and I would say it's a collaborative effort. So CSMs and engagement with customers is one thing, and I think that moved the needle quite a bit. Right now, we're hovering around 0, so we've made a big improvement over the last 2.5 years. And anybody that's tried to move NPS numbers by 40 points, I mean, that's a pretty monumental feat for any business. But it wasn't just customer success. It was a focus on listening to our customers through our NPS feedback, outreach and engagement at the executive level, as well as the operational teams for all of our customers, making sure that we understood where they sit today and what their goals were and where they wanted to take the product. Even if I go back to those first days in the pandemic, we had a program we started immediately after I got there called Bear Hug, which was, we have a lot of rich financial data around, we can aggregate together and see directionally where people are going. So as people were, getting very nervous at the start of the pandemic, I know this is a long time ago now, but, there was a lot of uncertainty at that point. So we went out with a positive outreach campaign. Here's what we see in the marketplace. Here's what we see subscription businesses doing. And that helped reassure a lot of our customers that not only was everything going to be, reasonably okay, it wasn't from a health perspective, but certainly from a business standpoint, we saw that we could see businesses were improving. Some were improving, some were staying static. And then there, of course, were some that were not doing well. So that data also provided some reassurance to our customers, and it gave us an opportunity to also introduce the customer success motion to a lot of our top customers and make sure that they understood that they had new people involved in their accounts that were focused on outcomes and value for them and making sure that they got what they need out of the software.
And I believe, if I'm doing my homework correctly, that you also shoveled out some bad deals, some customers that maybe were going to be churn candidates no matter what. Can you talk a little bit about what that looked like?
Yeah, from a churn perspective, I mean, we spent a bunch of time evaluating. We also looked at evaluating the number of deals that we had in the pipeline and what was going to renew for the rest of the year. We started to implement a lot of process around our renewals. So instead of looking at like what was going to happen in the next month, we extended that way out to now we have a rolling 12-month forecast where I can see at any point during the year, what does our churn look like next year? We just completed actually a full bottoms-up forecast that we do. So when I get a number from our finance team, this is what we want churn to be next year. We match that up with where we see all these customers and kind of their health, so I can understand exactly where we're going to land next year. So a lot of that was putting in process. We also look, 6 and 9 months out every quarter. We force the teams to get together and talk about these customers, even though those renewals maybe just happened 3 months ago. And then back to the churn question, there was a lot of maybe I wouldn't say necessarily bad deals, but customers that weren't implemented, customers that weren't using the software correctly. Maybe it wasn't a good fit. Maybe they had a product launch that didn't work out for them. So in those first 6 months, we really started to look at, are these good customers? Are we really focusing on where our core benefit is going to be? And if it wasn't a good match, then we took that opportunity in those first 6 months to kind of get our house in order and make sure that we had a really solid foundation on renewals. And since that point, it's been the bedrock of how the company has grown. So that's been a big factor.
I'm interested in hearing you say that you have a general forecast for your churn 12 months out. That's really impressive. Yeah. And you're doing that from bottoms up, right? From the ground level, from the actual CSM IC individual contributor level, I would imagine. You kind of mentioned it a little bit. Your team congregates and talks about customers, but like, what does that program look like operationally? How do you execute on that?
Yeah, great question. So we pull an entire every year about this time we pull a full year's forecast and we look at what is next year going to look like. So I get a number from finance, or CFO says I need churn to be this number, and I say okay, that's great. Let me go back and figure out.
Sorry, but I'm gonna interrupt you there for 1 second, Jeremy, because I want to break this apart here. So CFO. What's your CFO's first name?
Todd.
Okay, so Todd comes to Jeremy and says, "Hey, I need churn to be X." Right, like. Todd, you're a CFO. You're not a CS, right? Like, where is Todd getting these benchmarks? What's his rubric or heuristics for coming up with that benchmark for you?
Great question. I mean, a lot of it's based on historical run rates. It also is where we want to grow as a company. So as we present our metrics to Wall Street, we want to make sure that we're in line with what the expectations are for where our business is going to grow. So that's what drives the financial aspect of what number we're going to come up from a finance standpoint. Now, when I get back down to, boots on the ground, that number might be drastically different. The good news is over the last 2-3 years, it hasn't been that different. And, we spend a lot of time going through each and every deal with every customer. And this is a company-wide focus. So we look at our product telemetry. We understand, are those customers healthy or not? And what are the reasons behind that? And it also gives us a really good run book to be able to run what we call retain and grow strategies against these customers, to be able to understand if they are in trouble, how are we going to be able to retain that customer and then ultimately have them grow? So it gives us a good roadmap for next year as to where we want to focus. And it really is the devil's in the details. There's no easy way to do this. You got to get into the data. You got to understand your customers. You got to pull the teams together to make sure that everybody's opinion is heard, both from a sales perspective, go-to-market teams, CS, product. We want to make sure that we get a holistic picture of that customer so that we can be accurate with our representation back to finance and ultimately Wall Street too.
And what tools are you using? You mentioned Gainsight, but in order to come up with that view, that telemetry and product information and maybe some qualitative analysis as well, what are the different toolings that you're applying to come up with that assessment?
Yeah, we use a 4-point scale. We look at customers that we know are churning. Maybe our software is actually pretty sticky, so it takes some customers a little bit of time to get off of our product. So they may be at that for a year or more. So that's one classification. Then we look at low, medium, and high risk. High risk being, we have a major problem, or that the customer has identified that they're shopping around, or that we're not stable. So we use that classification system. We pull data from, we have a 5-point health scoring system inside Gainsight. A couple of those scores are automated, but we look at things like business health. We look at the technical deployment. Is there a product fit? How's our executive sponsorship into that customer? So do we have the right executives engaged? And then lastly, the commercials. Are they consuming? We're a subscription platform, subscription business. Are they consuming the subscription portion? Or are they leveraging the product from everything they have in their contract? Is the contract sound? So with that health scoring, we can actually identify the risk factors. Are they red, yellow, or green in each of those categories? Then we also use sentiment from the CSMs, from our AEs, product teams, our global services teams, anybody who interacts with that customer. Are they in a good, sound footprint? So some of it is hard data we use from telemetry or products. Some comes from Gainsight, and then we also have soft metrics that we pull in data from various human sources as well.
Soft metrics from various human sources, aka anecdotal feedback from a roundtable of people that have interacted with that customer, saying, "Here's what I've heard. This is my belief and my assessment on their health."
Yep, that's exactly it. And then we sit down and we go through every book of business. We talk about it, over Zoom or if they're local teams, but we do this across the globe. Everybody from our teams in Japan, Australia, North America, Europe, and then our teams in Chennai, India as well.
The last topic I want to talk to you about is one that I know is very meaningful to you, is very meaningful to me. It's very underserved is the operative word here, which is diversity and inclusion. And I know that it's a passion of yours. You've taken strides to build out that culture within your team at Zuora. Can you talk a little bit about that, like what you're most proud of as far as diversity and inclusion on your team?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, prior to joining Zuora, I worked for a small startup called Entelo, which was a piece of software that helped companies with their D&I strategy. So it helped them identify candidates, whether on LinkedIn or other sources, that would help them improve those diversity metrics that they're after. That's where I became a big proponent of it. It's always been something that I've focused in my career, and it's one of the things that we also focus on Zuora. So because we were building this team from scratch, we had an opportunity to also look at, how did we want to build that? And when I think about my teams, I want them to reflect and be part of the way that I want our company to be perceived in the world. So one of the big focuses that we always focus on for our D&I strategy is the pipeline. A lot of times it's not because people lack the effort or the emphasis on that they want to have a D&I strategy that succeeds, but they're not setting themselves up for success. So we make sure that funnel is filled with candidates that are going to allow us to hit our D&I goals down at the later stages. So number one focus is making sure that we have a really strong pipeline so that when we get down to 2 or 3 candidates and we start making decisions, that we have a higher propensity to be able to have somebody that is from an underrepresented community or is part of our diversity and inclusion strategy. And we've been pretty successful with it across the board for our company. We also look at promoting people from within. So if you look at my management team, a huge makeup of that is very gender-based. So we have a lot of female directors, managers, heads of CS across the globe. And then we also look at underrepresented communities as well for promotion. So we try and always emphasize that in the recruiting process, that at the end result, we want to make sure that we have a good pipeline so that we can get to those goals that we have. And again, we took the team from zero. We have roughly around a 40-50% D&I strategy across the team, and also a lot of gender parity across my team as well.
That's great. I love hearing that. Jeremy, this was a great conversation. Awesome to hear the story about how you help rebuild, I should say, the CS org at Zuora. Really, really sounds like an amazing opportunity for you, for the team there. And you guys are off to the races. Thank you so much for being on the program.
Sounds great. Thanks, Josh. I really appreciate it.